This episode brought to you by the Neurodiversity University, a new division of the Neurodiversity Alliance, home of the Neurodiversity Podcast. Check out Strategies for Supporting Twice Exceptional Students, a continuing education and professional development course for educators and school districts from Emily Kircher-Morris, author of Teaching Twice Exceptional Learners in Today's Classroom. For details, go to neurodiversity.university.
What is neurodiversity?
What is it about these people?
Dyslexia,
autism spectrum,
ADHD, gifted,
dysgraphia.
All brains are different.
It's okay to be who you are.
This is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 109. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris, and since this is the final week of 2021, we're sharing some of our most loved episodes from the past year. Today's episode features one of our favorite guests. He's a professor emeritus from Kent State and the author of many books and articles related to the development of gifted children. That's straight ahead. Remember that our first course for the Neurodiversity University site will be launching in January. Our first course, which I'm super excited about, is Strategies to Support Twice Exceptional Students. This course is created for educators and school districts who want to learn more about supporting twice exceptional learners in their classrooms. It is totally virtual, and it can be used for in-house professional development for teachers, or there will also be a self-study option. You can sign up to find out more. Go to neurodiversity.university. Okay, time to talk about supporting bright kids.
Hi, I'm Jim Delisle, and I've been an educator for too long, 46 years. This is my swan song. This will be my last year of teaching. In fact, next Friday will be my last day of high school teaching. And it's always been great to be on this broadcast.
Hang right there.
Identifying, supporting, and challenging gifted and twice exceptional students is often difficult for school districts. But Emily Kircher-Morris's new book, Teaching Twice Exceptional Learners in Today's Classroom, provides guidelines and a unique approach for identifying and understanding 2E students. It includes strategies that will help educators and administrators provide strength-based instruction, motivate twice exceptional learners, and even help them with self-regulation. It contains important information to help educators advocate for 2E students, including things you need to know about individualized education plans and the Section 504 plan process. This important new book is now available. Go to neurodiversitypodcast.com for links to get your copy. Teaching Twice Exceptional Learners in Today's Classroom from Free Spirit Publishing. This is the Neurodiversity Podcast.
Joining us now is Jim Delisle, and we've invited him to talk about chipping away at the walls that often surround neurodivergent kids, ideas on how to support their social and emotional needs, and also how teachers can bring those ideas into their classrooms. Jim, thank you so much for being here. And I think a good place to start is with the question, why? Why is explicit social and emotional support so important for our kids?
I think the first thing is, rather than answer the question directly, I want you to think, and all the listeners also, that who are the teachers that they remember the most, they remember most fondly. They tended to be not the ones that did a great job teaching math, and they might have, but they were the ones who got to know you, who got to know your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, your fears. And I think with all kids, but especially those kids who have multiple things going on in their lives and their minds, it's really vital, because with both gifted kids and when I worked with kids with special needs at the other extreme, what I found was they can pretty much tell within a day or two whether you're legit, whether you're there for them or not. So to me, all learning is social emotional. And for kids who have complex lives, complex behaviors, I think it's even more vital that we look at the social and emotional piece, especially in the era of COVID. I know that there's a lot of talk right now of, when kids do get back to school, how do we assess them academically? And I think that's the wrong question to ask. It's going to be a real slog over the next year to 2 years at least, trying to determine who's learned what. But if we really focus on who they are and what their needs are, not only the kids, but the teachers. A lot of teachers have lost just as much as kids have lost. And so I think we really, at this point in our lifetimes, and this point in what's been going on with the pandemic, I really think the social and emotional needs for all kids is vital, but especially for those kids either at the extremes or who have some neurodiverse issues going on. It really is vital.
It seems like educators and sometimes even parents fall into like two camps. One says that schools should focus primarily on academic rigor, pushing kids toward a good GPA, and the other camp recognizes the importance of academic rigor, but believes social and emotional growth has to be at the foundation. Have you moved at all between those two camps throughout your career?
I think I used to separate the academics and the social and emotional in ways that I no longer do. And I learned early on when I taught kids who were in my class for either behavior issues or cognitive delays or anything, that they really, obviously they wanted to succeed. Obviously they wanted to do well academically, but at the same time, there were these forces in them, either telling themselves they weren't good enough, they weren't as smart as the other kids. And unless we focus on that and try to bring that together with curriculum, I don't see anymore how we can separate curriculum from social and emotional learning, because virtually every time you give a lesson to a kid, the kid's either thinking to himself or herself, I love this lesson, or I hate this, or I'm going to fail, or I'm going to do well. So how do you separate that from the content itself? And I think we've artificially divided cognitive learning from social and emotional learning. And I just don't think that's ever been true. And this, if anything, the pandemic has given us, I think it's a focus on how we really do need to connect these two pieces rather than keep them arbitrarily separated.
In my work with kids, especially those with different needs, I've noticed the social and emotional piece is far more important to them in their educational experience, where neurotypical kids can sometimes get by with, just focusing on academics. It's important that we don't always just teach to the middle.
Let me give you one example. I said I'm still a teacher, but I'm a very part-time teacher. I work 2 days a month in a high school in South Carolina for gifted kids. And it's a specially designed school. It's a public school. And the kids are selected in 8th grade from out of the 3,000 8th graders in our district. We select 50. And they come to our school and they take college classes simultaneously. The high school is on a college campus. Well, I work with the freshmen and what we call freshman seminar. And basically, I see my job as reinflating their emotional tires. And when I say that, what I mean is these kids come from middle schools where they were always the smartest kid, and now they're coming to a school where everyone was the smartest kid. So there's a whole dynamic that's very different. One of the books I wrote, called The Gifted Teen Survival Guide, is the book they use for their freshman seminar. And I want to talk about this one young man. I won't give his real name. I'll call him Jim, like me. Apparently, he read this first chapter, which was about kids who are neurodiverse. And there was an essay written by someone who, at the time the book came out, they were still using the term Asperger's. So he read this, and he brought the book home to his mother, and he said, "This is me. I never knew that there were other kids like me." Well, I knew nothing about this since I was only there a couple of days a month. When I went in the next time, it was just like he needed to be with me and talking and asking questions. He knew he was different from other kids, but apparently, even as a 9th grader, he'd never really had that identified for him or explained to him. So now every time that I'm in, he and I get together for lunch and we just sit down and we chit-chat and we talk about all manners of things. He's a brilliant kid. His lowest grade is like a 96% in calculus or something like that. But he's also a kid who is incredibly, he's definitely on the autism spectrum. He knows it now, and he sees that as an okay thing. And it's just really talking with, and I'd say we have a number of our kids who are on the spectrum at the school, but this young man is probably the most socially aware of how he's different. And I think now doesn't see that as a bad thing. That's the great thing about it. He's just like, this is who I am. And luckily, his mom is fabulous with him. So it's working out. But again, I hate for a kid who has incredible gifts, but also some challenges, especially socially, to have gone through almost 9 grades without ever understanding who he was. So to me, the importance is explaining to the kids as early on, just talking to them, whether as a parent or as an educator, who they are, what they can do, maybe not as easily as other kids, and just kind of get their views on it. But to not talk about it until they're teenagers is a little late.
I know in my practice, I find quite often that kids have just been unidentified because they mask really well. People don't understand what different types of disabilities look like when they're coupled with other, exceptionalities. So you have giftedness or you have, dyslexia, all of these things. It gets very difficult. And if kids are doing okay in school, it just kind of gets overlooked. And I have found the kids who started to understand their neurodiversity at a younger age, whatever that was, and people were talking to them about it and just normalizing it for them, or they had opportunities to meet with other kids who had similar needs, they are able to, I think, take it in stride. Some of my older clients who were diagnosed later, maybe even in high school, or I have one young woman who was not really diagnosed till after she really struggled in college, and they have a much harder time integrating that. And I think part of it's generational. Like, I think we just have a different understanding of that now. But I'm encouraged to know that I feel like that's changing culturally. We're starting to have a different awareness of it.
I think people have the best of intentions by ignoring the obvious. No one goes out to make a kid feel like they're not adequate or not good enough. But by not talking about the issues where they may be feeling they're not good enough, or they're struggling with something that other people find easy, to dismiss that or to discount it or just to ignore it, I think is a disservice. I know it's a disservice to the kids. It's hard to talk about big topics, but once you get a relationship going with a kid, especially one like this young man I'm talking about, it just, I don't know, it gives them a sense of trust with an adult, or hopefully more than one, but it really is something that just opens up their minds and their worlds that, okay, I can talk about this. I don't have to hide it anymore. And if anyone's making fun of this kid, I haven't seen it. But again, the social issues that come into play need to be discussed with that kid, just to get their views on what's going on and maybe how I can help.
I think part of the benefit of establishing that baseline of talking about it and normalizing those conversations is that opens the gateway for self-advocacy, which is so important for our kids. I think so many of them feel like they don't have that autonomy to ask for what they need. So if it's a very bright kid who needs more rigorous academic challenges, or if it's a child who needs accommodations, being able to self-advocate is really empowering for them. But if we ignore it or turn a blind eye, they feel like it's something maybe to be ashamed of or that they shouldn't address it.
One of the people who was foundational in my own learning was a man named William Perky, which is a great name to have considering his personality. But he wrote a book probably in the 1970s, 1980s, called Inviting School Success. And it's still on my bookshelf and I still use it. I reference it in my own writing. And very briefly, let me talk about what he mentions in that book that is, I think it's foundational for my own career, and I think it's instructive for others, especially educators. He talks about there's only 4 types of educators in the world. And the first one is an intentional inviter. And this is the best teacher you've ever had. These are the teachers who know who you are. They make a connection. They value that connection, and they move forward with you. They know what they're doing. When they're wrong, they admit it. And so the intentional inviter is the teacher you remember as always being in your corner. Okay. Then there's the unintentional inviter. And these are teachers who really do good things with kids, but they don't have a gestalt. They don't have a pattern. They just try something. If it works, they do it again. So they're really good, but they're scattered in terms of their effectiveness with kids. All right. So the unintentional inviter, the goal is to help them become more intentional. But again, they're good teachers. Oftentimes they're younger. They're trying to test things out to see what works and what doesn't. But they don't have a whole bag of tricks yet, if you will. The third is the unintentional disinviter. And this is where I think a lot of the neurodiverse kids see these teachers. For example, it would be a teacher who gives a math quiz, and then the next day comes in and says, there was only one A on this quiz. Can anyone guess who got it? Now, some kids will love that. Other kids will just shrink into their seat. Okay, so the unintentional disinviter does things or says things that he or she thinks are helpful, when in effect they have the opposite impact on the kid they're talking to. All right. And then there's the intentional disinviter, and that's the teacher who should never work with anything organic. Everything they touch dies. And hopefully there are not many of those in our profession, but we can all point to one or two who did whatever he or she could do to find what you were not good at and never let you forget they found it. Mm-hmm. So Bill Perky talks about how everyone in the school, from the custodians to the school secretaries to the cafeteria people to the teachers and principal, everyone is one of these four things. And I think that's so important to remember, that when a kid is in a school, every person to them is a teacher. They may not say that directly, and the younger ones especially see this as true. But if you're somebody who just feels you're in a place that is comfortable and you're accepted for who you are, it goes beyond the teacher. It goes to every person who you interact with during that day. Mm-hmm. And since our kids in school spend as much time with us as educators as they do with their parents, at least waking hours, that's why it becomes so vital to look at these intentional inviters and basically try to get as best we can to everyone in the school to be one of those things.
I think parents are often not quite sure where to go as far as addressing social and emotional skills at home, even though that's naturally what they are doing pretty much day in and day out. Mm-hmm. Are there certain things that you feel like parents should be aware of with their kids, or steps that they could take even at home to support those social and emotional needs?
As adults, we are trying to be problem solvers. So our kid comes home with an issue at school, whether it's with a classmate, with a teacher, with a test, whatever, and we immediately try to find solutions. And I think that's the wrong place to go. I think where you go instead is just listen. We do so much talking as adults to kids. Well, have you tried this? Have you done that? What happened? Instead, we just need to tell me more about it. I'd like you to explain, how did you feel when that person said this? We really need to do more listening and less talking. And I like to say, and again, I was a university professor, so I'm used to talking. If we could listen 75% of the time and talk 25% of the time, I think we'd really benefit our kids a lot more. Mm-hmm. So that's my key, is not to run to find a solution right away, because we might be trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. What you do instead is you listen, you ask questions, you reflect back with things like, wow, it really must have hurt when she said that to you. Or sounds like you didn't feel very good about yourself after you got your math grade back. Those kind of comments, which are more, as I said, reflective rather than solution-based, are the beginning of solutions. But when we run headfirst into the solution finding, we may be doing an unintentional disservice by not really understanding what the issues are. Mm-hmm. I mean, it might not be the grade at all. It might be that the kid was singled out as having a bad grade, and so the grade seemed like the problem, but it was the situation in which the whole event occurred.
Yeah.
So parents, be more quiet and listen a little bit more than you do.
It's so natural to, like you said, want to try to solve those problems.
Sure.
Every parent wants to rescue their child and protect them from any of those uncomfortable feelings. But it's hard to step back and both allow them to come to us, allow them to share their feelings, allow us not to try to interpret them. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, we want our kids to kind of be in some uncomfortable situations in school and have to handle things on their own. Right. But on the other hand, sometimes they really do need someone to advocate for them. It's just a really difficult balance to strike, I think, for many parents.
It definitely is. And again, I think, as I said, the listening really helps, because the more you listen, the more you gain information about the true issue. That's the child himself or herself may not even be aware what the true issue is. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure you know this from your counseling practice, that the worst time to try to convince somebody to calm down or see things in a different way is when they're anxious, when they're upset, right? Because things go in one ear and out the other. If your child is, and this is true at school, but I'll make it home-based. If your child comes home very upset about whatever the issue is and is crying or is just just in a really bad form, don't even try to talk at the time. See, it sounds like you're really in a bad place right now. Why don't you take a time to reflect, listen to some music, run around the block, and we'll talk about this, when you're a little calmer. Because trying to solve something in the middle of a crisis generally doesn't work. Maybe once in a while it does. But overall, it's giving the kids space so they can try to figure something out, maybe on their own. But if not, at least they'll have more clarity when they're not as upset and they're talking about it with us.
Yeah. I think parents are more likely, or educators are more likely to also then get elevated if it's in the middle of that crisis.
Well, this is as true with spouses as it is with kids.
That is true. Let's just take a break. We'll reconvene.
That's right.
How do you see those social and emotional needs changing as kids develop and grow through their years? Are there specific factors that you feel like really influence different developmental needs?
Most of my work has been with adolescents, but with the teachers I've worked with who work with young kids, it's almost like the young kids just want to be accepted. They just want to be welcomed, if you will. And they know from a very, almost like a surface level, whether or not they're in a good place. I think with teenagers and adolescents, they almost need to be invited to enjoy school. You have to be much more deliberate. The older the kids get, the more mature their minds are in terms of their social and emotional needs. We now have a 2.5-year-old grandson, and he goes to daycare every day. And he just needs to know that, people are there to care for him. He's not as much involved with the social and emotional needs as much as he just feels like he's in a comfortable place. As kids get older, you really need to have more focus than that. And that's where I think, again, the social and emotional learning, whether it's you have class meetings just to go over what's going on in the class, maybe the kids lead them, or the kids have the option of leading if there's an issue that comes up, they can go to the teacher and say, can we have a meeting about this? Because a classroom can be more like a family in terms of relationship. That's true in all grade levels, but I find it with adolescents, we do that too seldom because we so focus on the academics that we really need to focus more on these other pieces of living.
Yeah. I know when I worked as a school counselor and as a gifted ed teacher, I really enjoyed implementing that social and emotional component of the curriculum, which is part of why I transitioned into being a mental health counselor for neurodivergent kids. But one of the things that you've focused on and talked about is integrating writing into that, and how teachers can pull writing into that development of social and emotional skills. But I don't know that I ever really did a whole lot of writing with those activities. Why do you think that writing is a good medium to help kids develop some of the skills that we are talking about?
My wife and I actually wrote 2 books in the past couple of years that integrate social and emotional learning with writing activities. One of them is, and I want to give you some examples from it, but one of them is called Creating, I have to look at my own book to know the title, Creating Strong Kids Through Writing, 30-minute lessons that build empathy, self-awareness, and social emotional understanding. There's a lot of talk about kids who are reluctant writers. I've never met one. All I've met is lousy prompts, lousy writing assignments. Because if you are able, and I think writing is the best medium I know to do this in school, if you are able to get the kids to open up about who they are, their joys, their fears, through writing, you will find that even the most reluctant writer becomes engaged. And I do have some examples, if you'd like, that I could share.
Yeah.
Again, not promoting my book, but they are in there. And the first one's an activity that I do right near the beginning of the school year. And I found it in Vanity Fair magazine, of all places. The last page of Vanity Fair magazine always has an interview called the Proust Questionnaire, or Proust, I guess some people say Proust. And it's a famous somebody. The one from September of last year was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And there were about 30 questions that they answer in very short form. And I'll give you some of his, then I'll give you some of my own students' examples. So I call this Getting to Know You Better, and that's the activity I do with the kids. But for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, for example, the question was, what is your favorite journey? And he said, his answer, the question suggests a spiritual journey or even an exotic trip. But I get both of those when I go to a jazz performance. It not only delights my senses, but it connects me to my ethnic culture in a deeply satisfying way. What is your greatest regret? Not staying with my piano lessons. I would love to be able to sit down right now and play a jazz classic like Fee Fi Fo Fum. And what is your favorite occupation? Writing. It's hard for sports fans to understand that a well-turned phrase is as satisfying as a slam dunk. So you translate those questions. I mean, who knew that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was so strong in music, right?
Yeah.
I do this activity with the kids the first week I meet them, the first time I meet them. I give them back some feedback, but then I've made a copy of every one of their responses. And at the last week that I meet them, I have them complete the form again, but then they also are given the form they wrote 9 months before to see how they changed, have they stayed the same. And I just want to give you a couple. This is from a girl named Julie. She says, "My greatest fear is being abandoned again. My idea of perfect happiness consists of peace and being in serenity with knowledge and the one I love. What do you consider your greatest achievement? My greatest achievement is regaining the will to live. What do you most dislike? I most dislike those that only know how to be hurtful." And then this one from one of my current students. I asked them what their favorite word and least favorite word is. And his least favorite word is dad. When I saw this and then I read some of his other responses, which kind of had another theme. For the last one is, what do I most dislike? I most dislike seeing people drunk. This young man and I talked the next week. We're talking every time I go in because I'm able to pick up through his writing that there's something more going on in both of these, Julie's and this young man's life, than I would know if I didn't ask simple questions like this. So you see how the connection is there. Even though it's a very brief writing activity, it also helps. It's not a guarantee, but it opens up the door for communication. And sometimes you walk through that door and sometimes you don't. But with these two young people, I think it's just a vital connection that I may not have been able to establish as quickly without having done an activity like this.
Yeah. It reminds me actually, and I hadn't thought about it in this context, but I have several clients who have a really hard time bringing up a topic during a session, but they have found that if they email me ahead of time and say, I want to talk about this, or I need to, I'm having trouble with this particular issue, then if I bring it up, then they're comfortable talking about it. But it's just that opening of the conversation in person when you're sitting there that's really overwhelming.
It is.
In this activity, it sounds like you're really giving them just this chance to put something out there. And I can imagine for these kids, there has to be that follow-up. If they were to put those things there and then didn't get that support or that follow-up from you, or, whomever their teacher might be, that might be really difficult for them because it is. They're looking for something there. They're seeking something.
They are. You don't write this kind of personal stuff without hoping somebody will respond to it. I mean, that's a guarantee. A lot of times when I give a workshop on the type of writing activities that I do, teachers will say, well, I don't have time for this, or how do you grade these? And I just want to slap them in the head. I mean, come on, why do you need to grade everything? I put comments on it for this young man who said his least favorite word was dad. I wrote, "You sound very interesting and complicated. I look forward to getting to talk with you this year." So even a brief comment like that can open up the door. Now, some kids don't need that, like you said early on. Some kids just kind of float away and do fine. A lot of them don't. And a lot of the neurodiverse kids, probably those who could use a little more one-to-one connection, similar to what I've developed with these kids.
Yeah, especially if they have any difficulty naturally forming those social relationships. If they have a hard time just connecting with the peers that they're with, sometimes they do gravitate, I think, towards adults.
And there's one other activity that I do I've actually done it with younger kids as well, but it started with a bet with Ernest Hemingway. You may know the story, but someone had made a bet with him, one of his buddies, that he could not write a novel in 6 words with a beginning, middle, and end. And he took up the bet and he won. Well, the 6 words he wrote were "for sale, baby shoes, never worn." That can have multiple meanings. And so I'll bring that up to the kids and I'll say, this is a really short writing activity. It's only 6 words long. But then you're going to do a poster in 6 colors, because there's 6 words, that describes something, and the prompts are something like, They have to write 6-word statements: your life as a student, your life as an athlete, your life as a son or daughter, your life in summary, your goals for the future, greatest defeat, greatest triumph, etc. And then in 6 words, they write the answers. So I'll just give you a couple of things that my students have written. And this is about the school they're in. The place I fit in, amazing. Wouldn't trade this for the world. Always hungry, worrying about my grades. Never been more comfortable in school. Staring at nothing for mental break. A couple of my favorites, though, are these. Started with promise, ended with dreams. Parents will always find things out. I love that one. Sometimes I don't want to go back. Don't let guys ruin your life.
Smart.
This is my favorite. I wonder what this button does. You know the kid who would write that one. Music reaches people. I make music. Raised my sister before raising myself. Change is always a breath away. And lastly, does hope always work like this? And then they do a poster in, again, 6 colors to one of their, because they do like 20 of these 6-word things. And then they just color up one of them. And you've got an art gallery of social and emotional growth in the hallway. And of course, you can follow up with conversations. When somebody says, does hope always work like this? That opens the door for conversation. So this is what I said. There's no such thing as a reluctant writer. It's just lousy activities that make them think that writing sucks.
Yeah.
And it doesn't.
These are all actually pretty brief activities. It's not like sitting down and writing a full essay. But I also feel that it would be really empowering for kids who maybe do feel overwhelmed by writing that, wow, I can put something really powerful in only a few words.
A few words, yeah.
And it can have a lot of meaning, and that might just help to build some of that self-efficacy that might filter into some other academic areas.
And honestly, some of the activities do get into full essays, but I don't start there. Because if I don't know the kids at the beginning, and I don't, obviously, at the beginning of the year, I don't want to turn them off at my first activity of, writing a 600-word essay about whatever. So no, you start small, and then you build up. The trust is built, the confidence is built, the skills are built, and you just move out. Again, does it work with every kid? Obviously, no. But I've had more success than not. I don't put grades on these, but I spend hours making comments. And you can see why.
Yeah.
If some kid's going to open up her heart to me, I'd be a fool to ignore that.
Right. So last question as we wrap up. You've given a lot of good gems, I think, through this conversation about how you would help kids and what you would say to them. If you were talking to an educator or a parent who's really trying to find a way to reach and support a child or a teen who's maybe struggling and they're having a hard time connecting, what advice would you give? What's the one thing that you would want them to know?
Especially if they know the kid already. It's not just a first-time encounter, but someone they've met over the past few weeks or months. I think the best thing to do is start with your observations. I've been listening to you and watching you over the past couple of weeks, and here are some things I've picked up. Can we talk about them and you tell me if I'm accurate? And I think that, but again, it's questioning, it's not dictating. And I think if we just have a conversation about what we think is true, who we think they are, they can correct us and say, no, that's not right. When I said this, I was just having a bad day. But you get to that place in a very quiet, casual way, and you can say, I've been observing. I'm just curious if my observations are right. And that opens up for the kid to really correct you if that's the case, or to just validate what you're feeling. So I think, again, to go in almost like a diagnostician rather than somebody who's trying to make a remedy right away is the best place to go. And unless we ask kids directly if what we are seeing is, and how we are interpreting is accurate, I don't think we're going to get very far with them. At least I haven't in my 46 years. So yeah, I would say the best thing to do is to listen, to question, and to keep the advice and the solutions for another time.
Jim Delisle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Emily.
In order to help kids develop a strong sense of autonomy and motivation, we have to first find their strengths. Often, in high-ability kids, we can leverage their fascination with problem solving and their interest in looking at situations in new and different ways, not only to help them reach new heights of achievement, but also to help support their areas of struggle. It's unfair to expect gifted kids to be good at everything. That belief is part of the reason why so many twice exceptional kids fall through the cracks. Whenever we ask children to reflect on their experiences and put them into words, whether written with paper pencil, dictated through speech to text, or whatever method works for them, we not only learn more about what makes them tick, we also help them learn more about themselves. I'm Emily Kircher-Morris. I'll see you next time on the Neurodiversity Podcast.
As 2021 comes to an end, we'd like to thank you for making it a year of incredible growth for us. Please continue to tell others. Thanks to the musicians who contribute to our podcast, without whom we'd just be a voice. As we move into 2022, we do so with optimism that it will be a better year for all of us. We could certainly use the change. The host of our podcast is Emily Kircher-Morris. The post-production editor and executive producer is me, Dave Morris. And for all of us here, thanks, and Happy New Year. This is a production of Morris Creative Services.